Good morning, guys. All right, I'm gonna read Harry Potter. Hopefully, my girls will stay entertained. Um, okay, so Harry went into Hogsmeade and met up with Ron and Hermione. Then they went into the Three Broomsticks, and while they were in there, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, Cornelius Fudge, Hagrid came in, and they were explaining what Sirius Black had done that was even worse than him killing all those people, and came to find out he was James and Lily's best friend. Not only was he James and Lily's best friend, he was also Hagrid's godfather. And then come to find out, on top of all of that, James and Lily knew that Voldemort were after him, so they'd gone into hiding, and they'd done a charm where no one could see them unless there's just the one secret keeper. Sirius Black was the secret keeper. Okay. And Dumbledore was sure there was somebody in the ranks that had gone over to Voldemort's side, and he wanted to be James and Lily's secret keeper. He was sure that somebody close to the Potters had been keeping you-know-who informed of their movements, said Professor McGonagall darkly. Indeed, he had suspected for some time that someone on their side had turned traitor and was passing a lot of information to you-know-who. But James Potter insisted on using Black? He did, said Fudge heavily, and then barely a week after the Fideus charm had been performed. Black betrayed them? Breathed Madame Rosmerta. He did. Black was tired of his double agent role. He was ready to declare his support openly for you-know-who. And he seems to have planned this for the moment of the Potter's death. But as we all know, you-know-who met his downfall in little Harry Potter. Powers gone, horribly weakened. He fled, and this left Black in a very nasty position indeed. His master had fallen at the very moment when he, Black, had shown his true colors as a traitor. He had no choice but to run for it. Filthy, stinking turncoat, Hagrid said so loudly that half the bar went quiet. Shh, said Professor McGonagall. I met him, growled Hagrid. I must have been the last to see him before he killed all them people. It was me that rescued Harry from Lily and James's house after they was killed. Just got him out of the ruins, poor little thing, with a great slash across his forehead and his parents dead, and Sirius Black turns up on that flying motorbike he used to ride. Never occurred to me what he was doing there. I didn't know he'd been Lily and James's secret keeper. Thought he'd just heard the news of you-know-who's attack, and to see what had done. White and shaken he was. And you know what I did? I comforted the murdering traitor, Hagrid roared. Hagrid, please, Professor McGonagall said. Keep your voice down. How was I to know he wasn't upset about Lily and James? It was you-know-who he cared about. And then he says, give Harry to me, Hagrid. I'm his godfather. I'll look after him. Ha! But I had me orders from Dumbledore, and I told Black no. Dumbledore said Harry has to go to his aunt and uncle's. Black argued, but in the end he gave in. Told me to take his motorbike to get Harry there. I won't need it anymore, he says. I should have known there was something fishy going on. He loved that motorbike. What was he giving it to me for? Why wouldn't he need it anymore? Fact was, it was too easy to trace. Dumbledore knew he'd been the Potter's secret keeper. Black knew he was going to have to run for it. That night knew it would matter of hours before the Ministry was after him. But what if I'd given him Harry, eh? I bet he would pitch him off that back halfway out to sea, his best friend's son. But then a wizard goes over to the dark side. There's nothing and no one that matters to him anymore. A long silence followed Hagrid's story. Then Madame Rosmerta said with some satisfaction, but he didn't manage to disappear, did he? The Ministry of Magic caught up with him the next day. Alas, if only we had, said Fudge bitterly. It was not we who found him. It was little Peter Pettigrew, another of the Potter's friends. Maddened by grief, no doubt, and knowing that Black had been the Potter's secret keeper, he went after Black himself. Pettigrew? That fat little boy who was always tagging along after them at Hogwarts, said Madame Rosmerta. Hero worship, Black and Potter, said Professor McGonagall. Never quite in their league, talent-wise. I was often rather sharp with him. You can imagine how I regret that now. She sounded as though she had a sudden head cold. There now, Minerva, said Fudge kindly. Pettigrew died a hero's death. Eyewitnesses. Muggles, of course. We wipe their memories later. told us how Pettigrew cornered Black. They say he was sobbing, 'Lillian James, serious! How could you?' And then he went for his wand. Well, of course, Black was quicker, blew Pettigrew to smithereens." Professor McGonagall blew her nose and said thickly, "Stupid boy, foolish boy. He was always hopeless at dueling. Should have left it to the ministry. I'll tell you, if I'd got to Black before little Pettigrew did, I wouldn't have messed around with wands. I'd have ripped him limb from limb," Hagrid growled. "You don't know what you're talking about, Hagrid," said Fudge sharply. "Nobody but trained hit wizards from the magical law enforcement squad would have stood a chance against Black once he was cornered. I was junior minister in the Department of Magical Catastrophes at the time, and I was one of the first on the scene after Black murdered all those people. I will never forget it. I still dream about it sometimes. A crater in the middle of the street so deep it was cracked with a sewer blue, bodies everywhere, muggles screaming, and Black standing there laughing with what was left of Peter Pettigrew in front of him, a heap of blood-stained robes and a few fragments." Fudge's voice stopped abruptly. There was the sound of 5 noses being blown. "Well, there you have it, Rosmerta," said Fudge thickly. "Black was taken away by 20 members of the Magical Law Enforcement Patrol, and Pettigrew received the Order of Merlin First Class, which I think was some comfort to his poor mother. Black has been in Azkaban ever since." Madame Rosmerta let out a sigh. "Is it true he's mad, Minister?" "I wish I could say that he was," said Fudge slowly. "I certainly believe his master's defeat unhinged him for a while. The murder of Pettigrew and all those muggles was the action of a cornered and desperate man, cruel, pointless. Yet I met Black on my last inspection of Azkaban. You know, most of the prisoners in there muttering to themselves in the dark. There's no sense in them. But I was shocked at how normal Black seemed. He spoke quite rationally. To me, it was unnerving. You would have thought he was merely bored. Asked if I finished with my newspaper, cool as you please. Said he missed doing the crossword. Yes, I was astounded at how little effect the Dementors seemed to be having on him. And he was one of the most heavily guarded in the place, you know. Dementors outside his door, day and night. But what do you think he's broken out to do?" said Madame Rosmerta. "Good gracious, Minister, he isn't trying to rejoin you-know-who, is he?" "I dare say that he is. That's his eventual plan," said Fudge evasively. "But we hope to catch Black long before that, I must say. You-know-who alone and friendless is one thing, but give him back one of his most devoted servants, and I shudder to think how quickly he'll rise again." There was a small chink of glass on wood. Someone had set down their glass. "You know, Cornelius, if you're dining with the headmaster, we'd better head back up to the castle," said Professor McGonagall. One by one, the pairs of feet in front of Harry took the weight of their owners once more. Hymns of cloaks swung into sight, and Madame Rosmerta's glittering heels disappeared behind the bar. The door of the 3 broomsticks opened again. There was another flurry of snow, and the teachers disappeared. "Harry?" Ron and Hermione's faces appeared under the table. They were both staring at him, lost for words. Chapter 11. The Firebolt. Harry didn't have a very clear idea of how he managed to get back into the Honeyduke's cellar, through the tunnel, and into the castle once more. All he knew was that the return trip seemed to take no time at all, and he had hardly noticed what he was doing because his head was still pounding with the conversation he had just heard. Why had nobody ever told him? Dumbledore, Hagrid, Mr. Weasley, Cornelius Fudge. Why hadn't anyone ever mentioned the fact that Harry's parents had died because their best friend had betrayed them? Ron and Hermione watched Harry nervously all through dinner, not daring to talk about what they'd overheard, because Percy was sitting close by them. When they went upstairs to the crowded common room, it was to find Fred and George had set off 6 dung bombs in a fit of end-of-term high spirits. Harry, who didn't want Fred and George asking him whether he'd reached Hogsmeade or not, sneaked quietly up to the empty dormitory and headed straight for his bedside cabinet. He pushed his books aside and quickly found what he was looking for. The leather-bound photo album Hagrid had given him 2 years ago, which was full of wizard pictures of his father and mother. He sat down on his bed, drew the hangings around him, and started turning the pages. Searching until he stopped on a picture of his parents' wedding day. There was his father waving up at him, beaming, the untidy black hair Harry had inherited standing up in all directions. There was his mother, alight with happiness, arm in arm with his dad, and there, that must be him. Their best man. Harry had never given him a thought before. If he hadn't known it was the same person, he would have never guessed it was Black in this old photograph. His face was sunken in wax. His face wasn't sunken and waxy, but handsome, full of laughter. Had he already been working for Voldemort when this picture had been taken? Was he already planning the deaths of the two people next to him? Did he realize he was facing 12 years in Azkaban? 12 years, which would make him unrecognizable? But the Dementors don't affect him, Harry thought, staring into the handsome, laughing face. He doesn't have to hear my mum screaming if they get too close. Harry slammed the album shut, reached over and stuffed it back into his cabinet, took off his robes and glasses, and got into bed, making sure the hangings were hiding him from view. The dormitory door opened. "Harry?" said Ron's voice uncertainly, but Harry lay still, pretending to be asleep. He had heard Ron leave again and rolled over on his back, his eyes wide open. A hatred such as he had never known before was coursing through Harry like poison. He could see Black laughing at him through the darkness, as though somebody had pasted the picture over the album over his eyes. He watched as though somebody was playing him a piece of film, Sirius Black blasting Peter Pettigrew, who resembled Neville Longbottom, into 1,000 pieces. He could hear, though he had no idea what Black's voice might sound like, a low, excited mutter. "It has happened, my lord. The Potters have made me their secret keeper." And then came another voice, laughing shrilly, the same laugh that Harry heard inside his head whenever the Dementors drew near. "Harry, you look terrible." Harry hadn't gotten to sleep until daybreak. He had awoken to find the dormitory deserted, dressed and gone down the spiral staircase to the common room. That was completely empty except for Ron, who was eating a peppermint toad and massaging his stomach, and Hermione, who had spread her homework over 3 tables. "Where is everyone?" said Harry. "Gone! It's the first day of the holidays, remember?" said Ron, watching Harry closely. "It's nearly lunchtime. I was going to come and wake you up in a minute." Harry slumped into a chair next to the fire. Snow was still falling outside the window. Crookshanks was spread out in front of the fire like a large ginger rug. "You really don't look well, you know," said Hermione, peering anxiously into his face. "I'm fine," said Harry. "Harry, listen," said Hermione, exchanging a look with Ron. "You must be really upset about what we heard yesterday. But the thing is, you mustn't do anything stupid." "Like what?" said Harry. "Like trying to go after Black," said Ron sharply. Harry could tell they had rehearsed this conversation while he'd been asleep. He didn't say anything. "You won't, will you?" said Hermione. "Because Black's not worth dying for," said Ron. Harry looked at them all. They didn't seem to understand at all. "Do you know what I see and hear every time a Dementor gets too near?" Ron and Hermione shook their heads, looking apprehensively. "I can hear my mum screaming and pleading with Voldemort. And if you heard your mum screaming like that, just about to be killed, you wouldn't forget it in a hurry. And if you found out someone who was supposed to be a friend of hers betrayed her and sent Voldemort after her..." "There's nothing you can do," said Hermione, looking stricken. "The Dementors will catch Black and he will go back to Azkaban. And serve him right. You heard what Fudge said. Black isn't affected by Azkaban like normal people are. It's not a punishment for him like it is for the others." "So what are you saying?" said Ron, looking very tense. "You want to kill Black or something?" "Don't be silly," said Hermione in a panicky voice. "Harry doesn't want to kill anyone. Do you, Harry?" Again, Harry didn't answer. He didn't know what he wanted to do. All he knew was the idea of doing nothing while Black was at liberty was almost more than he could stand. "Malfoy knows," he said abruptly. "Remember what he said to me in potions. If it was me, I'd hunt him down myself. I'd want revenge." "You're going to take Malfoy's advice instead of ours," said Ron furiously. "Listen, you know what Pettigrew's mother got back after Black had finished with him? Dad told me. The Order of Merlin, first class, and Pettigrew's finger in a box. That was the biggest bit of him they could find. Black's a madman, Harry, and he's dangerous." "Malfoy's dad must have told him," said Harry, ignoring Ron. "He was right in Voldemort's inner circle." "Say you know who, will ya?" interjected Ron angrily. "So obviously that Malfoy's new Black was working for Voldemort. And Malfoy'd love to see you blown up into a million pieces like Pettigrew. Get a grip, Malfoy's just hoping you'll get yourself killed before he has to play you at Quidditch." "Harry, please," Hermione said, her eyes now shining with tears. Please be sensible. Black did a terrible, terrible thing, but don't put yourself in danger. It's what Black wants. Oh, Harry, you'd be playing right into Black's hands if you went looking for him. Your mom and dad wouldn't want you to get hurt, would they? They'd never want you to go looking for Black. That was weird. I'll never know what they'd have wanted, because thanks to Black, I've never spoken to them, said Harry shortly. There was a silence in which Crookshanks stretched luxuriously, flexing his claws. Ron's pocket quivered. Look, said Ron, obviously casting around for a change of subject. It's the holidays. It's nearly Christmas. Look, let's go down and see Hagrid. We haven't visited him for ages. No, said Hermione quickly. Harry isn't supposed to leave the castle, Ron. Yeah, let's go, said Harry, sitting up. And I can ask him now how come he never mentioned Black when he told me all about my parents. Further discussion of Sirius Black plainly wasn't what Ron had in mind. Or we could have a game of chess, he said hastily, or gobstones. Percy left a set. No, let's visit Hagrid, said Harry firmly. So they got their cloaks from their dormitories and set off through the portrait hole. Stand and fight, you yellow-bellied mongrels! Down through the empty castle and out through the oak front doors. They made their way slowly down the lawn, making a shallow trench in the glittering, powdery snow. Their socks and some of their cloaks soaked and freezing. The forbidden forest looked as though it had been enchanted, each tree smattered with silver, and Hagrid's cabin looked like an iced cake. Ron knocked, but there was no answer. He's not out, is he? Said Hermione, who was shivering under her cloak. Ron had his ear to the door. There's a weird noise, he said. Listen, is that Fang? Harry and Hermione put their ears to the door, too. From inside the cabin came a series of low, throbbing moans. Think we'd better go get someone, said Ron nervously. Hagrid, called Harry, thumping the door. Hagrid, are you in there? There was a sound of heavy footsteps. Then the door creaked open. Hagrid stood there with his eyes red and swollen, tears splashing down the front of his leather waistcoat. You've heard, he bellowed, and he flung himself onto Harry's neck. Hagrid, being at least twice the size of a normal man, this was no laughing matter. Harry, about to collapse under Hagrid's weight, was rescued by Ron and Hermione, who each seized under an arm and heaved him. Harry helping him back into the cabin, Hagrid allowed himself to be steered into a table and slumped over the table, stared into a chair and slumped over the table, sobbing uncontrollably. His face glazed with tears which dripped down into his tangled beard. Hagrid, what is it? Said Hermione, aghast. Harry spotted an official-looking letter laying open on the table. What is it, Hagrid? Hagrid's sobs redoubled, but he shoved the letter towards Harry, who picked it up and read it aloud. Dear Mr. Hagrid, further to our inquiry into the attack by a hippogriff on a student in your class, we have accepted the assurances of Professor Dumbledore that you bear no responsibility for the regrettable incidents. Well, that's okay then, Hagrid, said Ron, clapping Hagrid on the shoulder, but Hagrid continued to sob, and waved one of his gigantic hands, inviting Harry to read on. However, we must register our concerns about the hippogriff in question. We have decided to uphold the official complaint of Mr. Lucius Malfoy, and this matter will therefore be taken to the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. The hearing will take place on April 20th, and we ask you to present yourself and your hippogriff at the committee offices in London on that date. In the meantime, the hippogriff should be kept tethered and isolated. Yours in fellowship. There followed a list of the school governors. Oh, said Ron. But you said Buckbeak isn't a bad hippogriff, Hagrid. I bet he'll get off. You don't know them gargoyles at the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, choked Hagrid, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. They've got it in for interesting creatures. A sudden sound from the corner of Hagrid's cabin made Harry, Ron, and Hermione whip around. Buckbeak, the hippogriff, was lying in the corner, chomping on something that was oozing blood all over the floor. I couldn't leave him tied up out there in the snow, choked Hagrid, all on his own, at Christmas. Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at each other. They had never seen eye to eye with Hagrid about what he called interesting creatures. On the other hand, interesting creatures, and other people called terrifying monsters. On the other hand, there didn't seem to be anything particularly There didn't seem to be any particular harm in Buckbeak. In fact, by Hagrid's usual standard, he was positively cute. "You'll have to put up a good strong defense, Hagrid," said Hermione, sitting down and laying a hand on Hagrid's massive forearm. "I'm sure you can prove Buckbeak is safe." "Won't make no difference," sobbed Hagrid. "Them disposal devils, they're all in Lucius Malfoy's pocket, scared of him, and if I lose the case, Buckbeak..." Hagrid drew his finger swiftly down his throat, then gave a great wail and lurched forward, his face in his arms. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoy.